Okay, good evening everybody. I'm sure a lot of you will have met me before. I was stood at the front perhaps when your child came in year 7. You might have seen me at open evenings. But today I'm really just going to talk to you about what, for if you've already got a son in school, you'll call effort grades, but they are slightly changing. If you don't yet have a son in school, you will always know them as attitude to learning grades. Mr. King started at the beginning by saying what close a link there is between effort and success. We think it's really important that you understand that your sons understand that, and it's something that we talk about alongside the attainment that your son has made. We did decide to call them attitude to learning, not attitude for learning. AFL is something else, assessment for learning, which we're quite used to using in school, and so are your sons, or so your sons will be. So that's why we've decided ATL, attitude to learning, is the way forward. Just going to briefly talk you through why we've made the decisions that we have. You can come and talk to me about it in more detail if you'd like to. You do have a copy of the new attitude to learning descriptors on the back of the programme that you were given when you came in. You might want to look at that now. You might want to look at the slides and look at that later. I'll leave that up to you. Okay. Questions that we decided we needed to answer. There is no point doing anything in school for no reason. Everything that we do has to have a really strong educational foundation. It has to have a purpose in developing the learning of the boys in school. So, what is the purpose of attitude to learning grades? We decided there were 4 things that these grades needed to do. First of all, they're to give you some information. To give you and the boys some information about something other than your son's academic attainment, something that we think is very closely linked to your son's academic attainment, but something that you need to know. So that's the first purpose. Secondly, they're meant to be formative, not summative. It's not kind of, that's where he is, end of. It's more, that's how things are now, let's see what we can do to move this on. In the same way, as Mr. King was suggesting earlier on, that comment-only marking is also intended to move your son on with his learning. So for your son, and for you, and for the teacher really, these grades are intended to be formative. You will have one of these grades 3 times a year. They should facilitate discussion, and I mean lots of discussion between all the people who are involved. An attitude to learning grade should facilitate a discussion between you and your son. I hope that when your son comes home with his report, you won't just look at the attainment, you'll also look at the attitude for learning and talk to him about it. It should facilitate discussion between your son and your son's teacher. I like to think that if I'm giving a boy in my class a 3, we'll look at what 3 is later, I talk to him about that. He will know exactly why. Discussion is incredibly important. And it also enables some monitoring. It allows, particularly heads of year, heads of faculty, to just monitor where boys are in terms of the effort that they're putting into their learning, the effect that that's having on their attainment. It allows you to monitor it too, and it allows for some self-assessment and monitoring from the boys. Currently, we have a 4-point scale for our effort grades in school. So the second question was, do we need to move away from that 4-point scale? We thought about a number of options. A 3-point scale, good, really good, not so good. And we decided that probably wasn't fine enough. We previously, if you've had a son in school in more historic times, we will have had a 5-point scale. We actually quite like what we've got. So we decided we're not going to change it completely. We're going to keep the 4-point scale that we have. 4 points being successful, because you can't just pick that middle ground, which is often really quite comfortable. You know, you're either above halfway or you're below halfway. That's the way you want to look at it. Numbers or letters for attitude to learning grade. You can see that on the performers that Mr. Speaker's just put up on the screen, they were still letters. We have, however, decided that for ease of analysis, we are going to use numbers, and that's why the descriptors that are on the back of the programme are numbered 1 to 4. So, should we move away from a 4-point scale? No. Do we need to fundamentally change the effort grades that we currently have? No. There is no point changing something for the sake of it, but there is always point in improving something if it's appropriate, and that's what we think we've done. We think that the current effort grade criteria covers really the essential points that we think are important. However, there are some additions. And if you already have a son in school, this is really what I want you to take home tonight. Things are changing. If your son is coming into school in September, you don't have to rethink the way that you've thought about effort grades. But again, just perhaps pick up on some of the things I'm saying about the numbers. The whole point of this attitude to learning grade is to encourage your son to take responsibility for his own learning. All the things that Mr. King was talking about at the start of this evening, all the things about growth mindset, I really can improve this, I really can put my effort into this, I really can take responsibility for what I am learning, I need to challenge myself to do something that I can't now do. All of those things are covered really through the attitude to learning grades, and that's the kind of conversation I would really encourage you to have with your son when he brings these grades home. And for those reasons, these are the key words for each of the 4 descriptors: exceptional, good, improvement required, and unsatisfactory. They're just very brief descriptions of the types of behaviour that have tracked each of those grades. We thought about, who do we really need to equip, to train for using these grades? Well, first of all, it's got to be teachers, because we're the ones who will be awarding these grades to your sons. And we're going to launch them in September. We've already had some staff training, if you like, around this issue, but just so that you know what to expect. You will see that the criteria is quite detailed. And what we're really suggesting that subject teachers do is not to just pick a number out of the air. Please don't think that that's what happens now. I really think that it is. But that subject teachers use those descriptors as a virtual tick list. Where is this boy that's in my class? He's there, he does that, he does that. Okay, this is the best fit for that particular pupil. That's why they are so detailed. We're also hoping that faculty leaders will be building in a layer of QA, quality assurance in this, in the same way that we're accountable that the quality of our marking in terms of assessment is good. We also think that it's important that the quality of our reporting to you on attitudes to learning is good. So there will be a measure of accountability in this. We do think this is a big change. Grade 1 should be used sparingly. If I come to work every day and I do everything that's on my job description, I don't think that means I'm exceptional. I hope not. It means that I'm good at my job, it means that I'm responsible, but it doesn't mean that I'm exceptional. And if you look at the descriptors in a moment, you will see that we really think level 1 attitude to learn is for those boys who go that little bit extra over and above. And so, accordingly, very few boys in a class will be awarded level 1s. Now, if your son has been in school for some time, that probably means he's going to get less 1s than he has been getting. It cannot be true, can it, that 28 boys out of 30 in a class are exceptional? That isn't logical. And we really want now to be pushing that extra mile. So, grade 1s will be used sparingly to protect the exceptional descriptor. Attitude to learning level 3 will be used in order to highlight the need for action on the part of the pupil. And that really, again, is the conversation that I would like you to be having with your son. It's not, why have you got 3s? That's terrible. But, why have you got 3s? What do you think you can do about that? Or what should you be doing about that? Or what are you going to do about that? It's really important that we use these to push our pupils, our sons, to push themselves that little bit further. So level 1s, less, level 3s, a point for action. All attitude to learning level 3 grades should be accompanied by a conversation between the subject teacher who's given that grade and your son. Now, that doesn't have to mean your son misses 15 minutes of break because the teacher wants to give him a lecture. I hope it doesn't mean that. It might be dialogue, if you like, that's gone on in his book. Things that have been written at the end of a piece of homework that show that little bit more that needed to be done, or that little bit that wasn't done particularly successfully. It could be an actual physical conversation. It could be something that's gone on over the course of a couple of weeks. But please expect that to have happened. That's our expectation. And for heads of year, so that would be Mr. Jackson, year 7, Mr. Justice, Mr. King, Mr. Marsden, myself, we will be using these attitude to learning grades to monitor patterns of behaviour, of learning, of effort across school so that we can use them for some kind of intervention too. So that's what staff need to know. What do parents need to know? Well, basically the same things. So please bear in mind that if your son has always had ones in 7 out of 8 subjects, that probably isn't going to be the case in September, and that doesn't mean he suddenly isn't trying. Things have changed. You need to use the current descriptors, not the ones that we were using in the past. Talk to your son about his attitude to learning levels. Ask your son if he's had some kind of dialogue with his teacher, or, and honestly, I really think this is much more valuable, look in your son's books. Some of you, I don't know how often you actually look in your son's exercise books, but I encourage you to do that. Look at the comments that are in his book. Maybe that comment will enable you to have a conversation with him. Maybe that comment will give you some insight into something that you just didn't realise was an issue, was a problem. Or, on the plus side, maybe that comment will enable you to see something that your son has achieved you had no idea. He never told you about it, he didn't tell you about that fantastic, because they don't, do they? That fantastic thing that had happened, or a teacher said to him, or was written in his book. You look at it yourself, I think you'll find that that will be really rewarding and give you a real insight into school. And again, please don't see that last bullet point as anything threatening or invasive. It really is supportive monitoring. So please talk to your heads of year. At Key Stage 3, when you're coming into consultation day, you have every chance to see the head of year, as well as your son's form teacher, if you think there is a particular problem. Right. I'm not going to read through all of these, but if you want to look at the descriptors on the back of your programme, all I've done is to try to highlight the words that I think are the essence of the descriptor. So, exceptional, above and beyond. So that pupil who, I teach English, that pupil who comes to me and doesn't just say, hey, Mrs. Sims, I've read Death of a Salesman, not in year 7 obviously, but that pupil who says to me, do you know what, I read that, and I've also read another play of Arthur Miller's now, and do you know, I've read his biography. You see what I'm saying, don't you? That pupil who goes above and beyond, exceptional, that's really what we're talking about. That always is involved in their lessons, but it's also proactive, seeks and applies advice. That pupil who goes out of their way to take responsibility, to push themselves for their own learning. But the last one's really important too. The pupil who plays a positive and active role in the education of others. What do I mean by that? That person who is really encouraging in group work, who really challenges his peers, who really takes seriously that supporting somebody he's working with. To me, that's an exceptional learner. A good learner. I mean, if you just read that, you'd think, I'd be pleased if my son was working at that level. I'm pleased when anybody in school works at that level. But you know what I mean, that's good, isn't it? It's not exceptional, it's good. It's good that you most or all of the time do all of those things. And the good pupil plays a positive and active role in his own education, maybe not so much in his peers, but takes responsibility for himself. Improvement required. Okay, this is the level 3 that we're suggesting highlights the need for your son to do something, to take some action. I think inconsistent really is the key word there. We are not saying, and nor should you say to your son, if he gets level 3, that's a massive disaster. That is absolutely terrible, you absolutely failed, because they haven't. But they are not consistent. They're not going to make the progress that they could make, if you think about growth mindsets, had they a better or a more focused attitude to their learning. And they have a passive approach to their education. You know, the kind of boy who would copy anything out of a textbook or anything off the board or listen to me lecturing to him all day. Actually, that's not necessarily going to push him that much further down the road. And lastly, it's a horrible word. It's a really horrible word, isn't it? I hate to think that anything I do is unsatisfactory. It couldn't be worse, really. Cause for concern. You know, in the context of this school, if your work is unsatisfactory, that's a cause for concern. It's a cause for concern because you're missing out. This is me speaking to a pupil. It's a cause for concern because you're not going to make the progress that you could. It's a cause for concern because it will affect your attainment. And the last one, you have a negative impact on your own education or the learning of others. It could be because of disruption, it could just be because you don't engage. So when you're working in a group, you're not putting your effort in. And then finally, we just thought it would be appropriate to have a facility to put not applicable if a boy has missed quite a bit of school for a health reason or for whatever reason, rather than someone gets a really low effort grade, which tends to happen now. It's appropriate to have a not applicable and able to give a grade for that.